Welcome to Ancient Forbidden Knowledge. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode we open the gates to a forgotten world. A world where stone tablets speak of gods not from heaven, but from the stars. Where ancient kings built more than temples, they built machines. Machines that may have torn holes in space itself. Deep in the ruins of Mesopotamia lies a legend whispered through time, of a doorway between realms. If the Sumerian Stargate was real, who used it? And where did it lead? In the land between the rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates carved life into the desert, the Sumerian civilization rose more than 5,000 years ago. Their cities, Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, were unlike anything the world had seen. Towering ziggurats reached toward the heavens, and cuneiform tablets recorded laws, myths, and star charts with eerie precision. They spoke of gods called the Anuna, beings who descended from the sky, bringing knowledge, law, and order. But buried beneath the surface of these myths lies something stranger, an idea that challenges everything we think we know about the ancient world. At the heart of this forgotten empire was the city of Eridu. Known as the First City, it was dedicated to a god called Enki, the keeper of the abyss and master of secret knowledge. Eridu was more than a religious center. It was a place of initiation, of technology and contact. According to ancient texts, Enki maintained a me, a set of divine decrees or programs that governed civilization. These were not mere laws. They were blueprints for reality itself, instructions encoded with power. In one passage, Enki gives these me to humanity. In another, he hides them away, suggesting something so potent it could not be trusted in mortal hands. Sumerian creation myths describe a time when gods and humans coexisted, when knowledge flowed freely from the heavens to the earth. But then, something changed. Access was cut off. The gods withdrew. The texts become fragmented, and scattered throughout them are references to gates. Gates of the gods, gates of the sky, and gates between worlds. These are not metaphors. The language is mechanical. The words describe openings, alignments, and technologies that allowed travel not just across the land, but beyond it. Some tablets even depict celestial navigation symbols arranged in precise geometries, as if they were charts for traveling the stars. The temple of Eabezu in Eridu, which translates as House of the Waters, was said to be the dwelling place of Enki's knowledge. The entrance was guarded by Greek creatures described as half man, half fish, beings that came from the deep and returned to it. Priests and scribes who served here were trained in astronomy, mathematics, and rituals that mimicked cosmic cycles. These were not primitive people gazing at the stars. These were engineers of myth, working with symbols that mirrored the structure of the universe. When one examines the oldest texts from Sumer, those not rewritten or sanitized by later empires, a strange theme emerges. The gods did not just come from the stars, they returned to them. They used something described as a duru, a pillar or tube of light that connected the heavens and the earth. In some myths it is a storm, in others a chariot. But in the oldest versions it is a gate, a construct, something built. Why would a culture more ancient than any known empire speak so consistently of mechanisms, gates, and passages between worlds? And why did later powers, Babylon, Assyria, even Rome, seek to conquer and bury these same cities, as if obsessed with what they might still hold? The story of the Sumerian Stargate does not begin with fantasy. It begins with a civilization that recorded every detail, every measurement, every celestial event. And it begins in a temple where a god of water and wisdom left behind something that may not have been legend, but a device, real and dangerous, lost in the sands of time. The first whispers of something extraordinary hidden beneath the sands of Iraq emerged during the early 19th century. European archaeologists, funded by imperial powers and secret academic societies, began to dig into the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia with an intensity that raised questions even then. Their official purpose was to recover artifacts, decipher lost languages, and reconstruct the earliest pages of civilization. But scattered among their notes and correspondence are signs that something else was found, something that never made it into museums. In the ruins of ancient Nippur, a site sacred to the god Enlil, workers uncovered a series of deep shafts beneath the ziggurat. Among the clay tablets and temple offerings were enormous, perfectly carved stone slabs arranged in a ring. At the center was a platform scorched black. No explanation was ever given. The official reports described the slabs as ritual altars or astronomical markers, but those who saw them described something far more precise. Engineers brought in to examine the stone reported magnetic anomalies, irregular heat signatures, and a layout that appeared to mirror star constellations. One witness, a translator working with the British Museum, claimed in a private letter that the site resembled a mechanism, not a shrine. Around the same time, tablets emerged that described a divine artifact known as the Sipar Gate. Hidden beneath the temple of Shamash, god of the sun and justice, it was said to be capable of opening a path between heaven and earth. The texts described rituals of alignment, chanting in lost tonal frequencies, and the activation of sacred stones using light. It sounded like myth until similar instructions were found thousands of miles away, in Mayan codices referring to sky doors, that required harmonic chants and specific solar conditions to open. As political tensions rose in the region, many of these artifacts disappeared. Private collectors, government agents, and unknown intermediaries moved through the region, purchasing crates of tablets, seals, and ancient tools. Museums reported thefts with no signs of forced entry. In one case, a stone tablet referencing the Sipar Gate vanished en route to London and was later rumoured to have been seen inside a private intelligence compound in the United States. During the early 2000s, after the invasion of Iraq, looters raided the National Museum in Baghdad. While many assumed this was random chaos, some experts noted that the looters bypassed gold, jewellery and ceramics to target specific, catalogued items. These included tablets from Eridu, astronomical instruments, and unexplained cylinder seals depicting gods entering what appear to be vortexes or tunnels of light. United States military officials later confirmed that Special Forces units had recovered a number of artifacts, but never released details about what they were. Rumours swirled of a sealed chamber beneath the ancient city of Uruk, uncovered during excavation for a modern military base. It was said to contain a chamber lined with stone not native to the region, with carvings that did not match any known Mesopotamian style. Multiple reports from soldiers described strange vibrations, radio interference, and lights that appeared without source. The site was abruptly closed. No photos, no press, only silence. What if the Sumerians had left behind more than memory? What if they had constructed something that, in the wrong hands, could still function? Something that governments, intelligence agencies, and ancient priesthoods have fought to keep buried, not because it was superstition, but because it still held power. The deeper we go, the more the official story unravels. Mesopotamian artifacts that defy explanation have been quietly removed from public display, mislabeled, or hidden away in private collections. And yet, fragments remain, whispers encoded in symbols, in overlooked inscriptions, and in the architecture itself. These fragments point to a recurring theme, a controlled, structured method of accessing something beyond the physical world. Not through faith, but through frequency, geometry, and alignment. This was not mythology. It was a system. Take the Sumerian star maps. Etched into tablets thousands of years before the invention of the telescope, they depict celestial bodies that should have been invisible to the naked eye. One tablet from Nineveh shows a central star orbited by 12 objects, matching not only our solar system, including the debated presence of a 12th body, but also aligning with the orbital periods known only through modern astronomy. How could an ancient civilization possess such knowledge unless they had been shown? Cylinder seals from Lagash and Kish depict the Anuna gods stepping through what appear to be rings of flame, surrounded by swirling lines. These are not wings, and they are not decorative. The seals bear a striking resemblance to modern interpretations of wormholes or gravitational distortions. In many of these depictions, a human figure stands nearby, often kneeling or shielding their face, suggesting fear or awe in the presence of something overwhelming. A few seals even show a god reaching out as if to pull the figure through the gate. These are not isolated scenes. They repeat across different cities, rulers, and time periods. Then there are the sacred measurements. The Sumerians used a base 60 mathematical system, which they applied to time, geometry, and cosmic cycles. Ziggurats were constructed using proportions that mirror the harmonic frequencies found in quantum resonance today. The temple at Nippur is aligned to the cardinal points with sub-degree accuracy, matching the solar paths and lunar standstills. These alignments suggest not only astronomical knowledge, but intentional tuning, aligning physical structures with celestial forces, possibly to open or maintain energetic connections. Sonic resonance played a role as well. Descriptions from temple hymns include phrases such as "the voice of the god through the stone" and "the tones that shake the gate." Priests were trained not only in chanting, but in producing specific vibrations. In one recovered hymn, the text describes the chanting of 7 names to open the path between stars. This might be poetic language, but when identical harmonic frequencies appear in Tibetan throat singing, Egyptian temple acoustics, and even in Coral Castle's mysterious construction in modern-day Florida, one must ask, was this knowledge global? Scattered reports from independent researchers claim that when these frequencies are applied to specific stone arrangements, particularly basalt, granite, and other crystalline materials, the stones resonate almost imperceptibly in ways that cause electromagnetic anomalies. Experiments in laboratory conditions have shown localized disturbances in radio signals, unexplained temperature drops, and even perceptual distortions in sound and light. Though dismissed by mainstream science, these experiments mirror the descriptions found in Sumerian ritual texts, where the environment changed when the gate was prepared. Each of these clues on their own could be dismissed, but together they form a pattern, a hidden language of numbers, tones, and alignments that point not to superstition, but to engineering. The Sumerians were not guessing, they were building something that responded to the geometry of the stars, the resonance of sound, and the intention of those who knew how to use it. The further back we trace this pattern, the more it begins to echo beyond Sumer. In cultures that had no contact, no shared language, and no obvious trade routes, the same imagery appears: gates, portals, stairways to the stars. The Maya spoke of baktuns and sky doors that opened during specific alignments. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh's tomb was not merely a place of rest, it was a launch chamber for the soul aimed at the constellation of Orion. In Tibet, sacred mandalas show circular gates surrounded by flames, activated through chanting and precise meditation. Even in the myths of the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, there are tales of ancestors who arrived and departed through star paths, entering and leaving through shimmering veils of light. What connects them is not just symbolism, it is function. Every culture describes a method, a way to pass through, not through faith alone, but through ritual, calculation, and architecture. In each case, the structure or symbol is aligned with specific stars or solstices, and always tied to a god or being who comes from beyond. This implies a shared origin, a forgotten legacy disseminated across continents, distorted by time but never entirely erased. In the heart of the Incan Empire, high in the mountains of Peru, lies the site of Puerta de Hayumarca, the Gate of the Gods. Carved into a sheer rock face, the perfectly symmetrical doorway appears to lead nowhere. Local legend tells of a priest who, using a golden disc, opened the gate and vanished into another world. The layout of the carving, the use of acoustically resonant stone, and its orientation toward key constellations are all strikingly similar to descriptions found in Sumerian texts. Half a world away, but the blueprint is nearly identical. In India, ancient Sanskrit texts describe the Vimana, flying chariots of the gods that could traverse the skies and the stars. The texts even provide diagrams, propulsion methods, and the use of mercury and centrifugal force. While most scholars interpret these as metaphorical, others have pointed out that similar descriptions appear in Babylonian tablets, devices capable of lifting from the earth with fire, noise, and unbearable light. The Dogon tribe of Mali in West Africa possess astronomical knowledge that should be impossible without telescopes. They described Sirius B, an invisible companion star to Sirius A, with complete accuracy, long before modern science confirmed its existence. According to Dogon myth, their ancestors were visited by beings from that star system who emerged from watery ships and taught them about the cosmos. Again, the pattern emerges: contact, instruction, and departure, always through gates, always timed to the stars. And then there are the serpents. Nearly every ancient civilization has them. In Sumer, the god Ningishzida, who guarded the gateways of the gods, is represented as a serpent with wings. In Mesoamerican myth, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, opened portals and brought wisdom. In India, the Naga, semi-divine serpents, guard treasures and hidden paths below the earth. The serpent appears not just as a symbol of knowledge, but of transition, of passage between dimensions. A guardian of thresholds. These recurring symbols, portals, serpents, chance alignments, are not coincidence. They are the remnants of a system, a lost technology. One that may have once connected humanity to a much larger cosmic network. A network that was accessed not through machines in the modern sense, but through harmonics in tension and resonance with forces most today would call myth. If the Sumerian Stargate existed, it would not have stood alone. It would have been one node among many, a global lattice of access points, now buried, sealed, or forgotten. And yet the echoes remain, in the ruins, the rituals, and the persistent whisper that we were once more than we are now. For those who still question why such knowledge is missing from textbooks and museums, the answer lies not in absence, but in obstruction. The academic firewall, though unspoken, is real. It is a silent boundary reinforced by ridicule, career destruction, and the slow erasure of inconvenient truths. Within the hallowed halls of archaeology and ancient studies, certain topics are not merely dismissed, they are unmentionable. Not because the evidence is lacking, but because its implications cannot be controlled. Take Zecharia Sitchin. Though criticized for his interpretations of Sumerian texts, he brought mainstream attention to concepts hidden in plain sight, references to planets beyond Pluto, to beings descending from the heavens, and to technologies mistaken for miracles. Rather than engage with the claims, institutions branded them as pseudoscience and moved on. But even among his detractors, few could explain how some of the tablets he translated described planetary orbits with shocking precision. The same applies to others who tried to bridge the gap between ancient knowledge and modern science. Scholars who proposed that ziggurats were not just temples, but energy conductors. Engineers who suggested that sacred sites were acoustically engineered to open altered states of consciousness. Astronomers who noticed star alignments in ancient architecture that could not be accidental. One by one, they were discredited, not with evidence, but with silence. Academic journals act as filters. Funding determines research. Tenure locks scholars into a system where questioning accepted narratives is a career risk. When a researcher uncovers anomalous data, something that points to advanced knowledge in the ancient world, they are often advised to leave it out. Or worse, to reinterpret it in a way that fits the consensus. Peer review becomes a gate not for truth, but for conformity. And then there is the matter of language. Much of what we know about the Sumerians comes from translations. But language is not neutral. Words are chosen. Context is framed. When early translators encountered terms that resembled modern technology, shining tubes, gates of fire, chariots that fly, they softened them into metaphor. A storm replaced a beam of energy. A temple became a place of worship, not a functional structure. Over generations, the real meaning slipped away beneath layers of academic comfort. When high-resolution scans of cuneiform tablets became available, independent researchers began finding inconsistencies in the official translations. Words rendered as holy also meant electrified. Phrases translated as ascending to the gods could also mean crossing through the opening in the sky. But those interpretations were ignored, not because they were inaccurate, but because they were dangerous. They pointed to a version of history that included physics, engineering, and interaction with non-human intelligence. Conferences on ancient studies often prohibit speakers from presenting fringe theories, regardless of evidence. Museum exhibitions are curated to avoid controversy. Even mainstream documentaries edit out footage that shows too much. What remains is a sanitized version of the past, one where the Sumerians were simply primitive farmers, inventing writing and worshipping imaginary beings. But when the same institutions quietly fund expeditions to the very sites they dismiss publicly, when private foundations connected to elite universities acquire anomalous artifacts and store them in undisclosed locations, When the world's most advanced particle physicists consult ancient symbolism in designing new experiments, we must ask, is the silence ignorance, or is it strategy? What is being protected is not just reputation, but control. Because if the Sumerians had access to technologies that rival our own, or if they had contact with intelligences beyond Earth, then the entire foundation of modern power structures begins to crumble. History, after all, is not just a story of the past, it is the map to who holds the truth now, and that map has been carefully redrawn. Beneath the polished stone of accepted history lies a network of theories long dismissed as fringe, yet increasingly difficult to ignore. These are not mere fantasies, they are frameworks constructed from anomalies, cross-cultural patterns and suppressed discoveries. When viewed together, they offer startling possibilities. The Sumerian Stargate, if real, may not have been a singular invention, but the surviving remnant of an advanced system, perhaps inherited from a civilization long lost, or gifted by entities not born of Earth. One such theory posits that the Anuna were not symbolic gods, but literal visitors, beings who arrived through artificial portals, or who constructed them as means of return. Descriptions of the Anu consistently refer to them descending from the sky in vessels that shimmered, roared, and scorched the ground. These were not dreams of primitive minds, they were accounts recorded in hardened clay with astonishing consistency. The Duru, or shining column, appears in multiple tablets, each time associated with divine travel between realms. What if these were depictions of a stabilized wormhole? A corridor in space-time held open through frequency, matter, and intention. In another line of thought, the Stargate is not merely a machine, but a consciousness interface. Ancient rituals were not symbolic gestures, they were activation codes, tuning the mind and body to interact with the structure. If the human brain is sensitive to vibrational states, then chants, geometric temples, and sacred timing could have induced a resonance strong enough to alter perception or location. In this view, the gate did not move the body, but projected the consciousness. Astral travel, dimensional overlap, or quantum entanglement with distant realms become viable possibilities, especially when one considers how many cultures describe dream journeys as real, not metaphorical. More radical still is the idea that the Stargates were designed not by the Sumerians, but rediscovered by them. Some researchers believe the gates predate even the earliest known empires, structures from a pre-cataclysmic world, perhaps from the time before the flood. This lost age, referenced in texts from Mesopotamia, India, and Mesoamerica, speaks of a golden era when gods walked with men and knowledge flowed freely. The gates, in this context, were remnants, survivors of a fallen network. The Sumerians may have restored one, possibly at Eridu, using only fragments of what once was a global system. There are also theories connecting the gates to energy grids of the Earth. Ley lines, mapped in various ancient traditions, converge at megalithic sites and temples across the planet. If these lines are more than myth, if they represent currents of electromagnetic or telluric force, then stargates may have functioned like transformers or switchboards, tapping into the planet's own energy to bridge gaps between space and dimension. The ziggurats, with their layered design and specific mineral composition, may have acted like resonant batteries, charging and stabilizing the gate during use. Still others suggest that the gates were not for escape, but for control, that the priesthood used them not to flee this world, but to summon something into it. The rituals may have opened access not to stars, but to consciousnesses or intelligences beyond ordinary perception. In Sumerian myth, the opening of the Abzu, the abyss, always comes with risk. Beings emerge, knowledge is gained, but balance is broken. The knowledge is always too much, too fast, too dangerous. Each of these theories stretches the boundaries of conventional belief, but all are rooted in a single truth, that ancient civilizations were in possession of something profound, something that made the impossible routine. Whether by craft, consciousness, or communion with something other, the Sumerians built a technology of transition, one that reached beyond the stars, and perhaps beyond the limits of human understanding. To fully grasp why such staggering knowledge would be buried, we must confront an unsettling question. Who benefits from the lie? History, rewritten with deliberate precision, is rarely shaped by accident. Behind every missing artifact, every redacted tablet, and every silenced scholar stands a force with motive, a force invested in keeping humanity tethered to a narrow timeline, one in which we are alone, primitive, and powerless. Ancient empires understood the importance of controlling knowledge. In Babylon, the priesthood monopolized access to sacred texts and astronomical records. Only the initiated were permitted to interpret the omens of the stars. In Egypt, only high-ranking priests could enter the innermost sanctums of the temples, spaces constructed with resonant stone and encoded with cosmic geometry. In these chambers, rituals took place that were said to connect the living with the divine. But access was always restricted. Knowledge was never democratized. It was hoarded. As the millennia passed, that same control evolved. When the Library of Alexandria burned, it was not an accident. It was a reset, a surgical erasure of contradictory timelines, foreign sciences, and forbidden maps. What remained was curated, safe, linear, and loyal to empire. Those who retained fragments of the old knowledge, such as the Gnostics, the Essenes, or the keepers of oral traditions in Africa and the Americas, were hunted, disbanded, or assimilated. In the modern era, that same process continues, only now with greater sophistication. Governments fund archaeological missions but censor findings. Corporations purchase excavation rights, then seal dig sites. Intelligence agencies monitor esoteric research, not because it is fantasy, but because it flirts too closely with forbidden truths. Even mainstream entertainment, while appearing to mock these ideas, also normalizes them, hiding reality in fiction so that truth, when spoken, sounds like parody. Religious authorities, too, have a stake in the concealment. If the Sumerian Stargate existed, if humanity once traveled or communicated with entities from beyond, then the central claim of divine singularity collapses. Revelation is no longer exclusive. Miracles are no longer unrepeatable. Power dissolves. The gate does not just challenge scientific orthodoxy, it threatens spiritual monopoly. Secret societies may hold another piece of the puzzle. From the Knights Templar to the Freemasons, countless groups have preserved symbols, rituals, and blueprints tied to ancient architecture and cosmic alignments. Their obsession with gateways, keys, pillars, and stars suggests a legacy of hidden knowledge passed down in fragments, perhaps distorted, but never entirely lost. These symbols persist not because they are decorative, but because they once had function, meaning, purpose. There is also the matter of psychological control. To suppress the idea that humans once opened portals to other worlds is to keep us small, to reinforce the belief that we are confined, bounded by physical laws, and dependent on institutions for truth. If the Stargates were acknowledged, if even one tablet were verified as a blueprint for interdimensional access, it would ignite a transformation. People would ask what else has been hidden, who else has lied, what other doors remain closed. And perhaps that is the greatest danger to those in power, not the gate itself, but what it represents. A civilization that understood its place in a greater cosmic order, a humanity unafraid to cross boundaries, a species that once built monuments not to glorify kings, but to open paths between worlds. To awaken that memory is to awaken rebellion, against limitation, against control, and against the imposed illusion of helplessness. So the Stargate remains a myth, officially, quietly, carefully, because the moment it becomes real, the illusion begins to collapse. And what lies beyond the gate is not just another world, it is the truth of who we once were, and who we may yet become. If the Sumerian Stargate once stood among us, hidden within a ziggurat, buried beneath temple ruins, or humming silently beneath the earth, then its implications shatter the foundation of our accepted reality. Because if even one element of this ancient system is true, then our understanding of history, consciousness, and physical law must be rewritten from the ground up. This is not just about the past, it is about the trajectory of our species and the forces that have shaped it. Imagine a world where humanity did not evolve in isolation, but was influenced, perhaps even guided, by intelligences far older and far more advanced. These entities, remembered as gods in Sumer, Egypt, and beyond, may have shared fragments of their technology or consciousness. Not to control, but to uplift. The Stargate may not have been a weapon, or even a tool, but a bridge, a way for beings of different realms to interact, exchange, and learn. If that is true, then what we call mythology is not fiction. It is memory, encoded in symbols we have forgotten how to read. Now imagine a world where that bridge was never sealed, where the knowledge was preserved, not destroyed, where temples were not burned but studied, where the chants, the frequencies, and the star alignments were not dismissed as superstition, but understood as the foundation of an advanced science of consciousness and matter. We would not be debating whether we are alone in the universe. We would be preparing to meet our cosmic kin with awareness and purpose. If the Stargate is real, then so is the concept of multidimensional space, not as abstract theory, but as a navigable reality. Time and space become fluid. The universe becomes a web of access points, connected by intention and resonance. The human mind, long underestimated, becomes the interface. We stop being passive observers and become participants in a wider cosmos. A cosmos where death is not the end, where the spirit is not metaphor, and where reality itself can be shaped by thought. This also redefines what it means to be human. For centuries, we've been told we are insignificant, a brief flicker on a pale blue dot drifting in a meaningless void. But if the Sumerians were right, and if the gate was real, then we are far more. We are beings with cosmic ancestry, builders of light, keepers of frequencies, architects of form. And the denial of that identity is not just an academic error, it is a theft of destiny. Think of the lost children of Earth, generations raised in ignorance of their potential, taught to obey, to consume, to forget. The sealing of the Stargate was not just the end of an age. It was a severing, a disconnection from the wider network of being. And those who maintain that severing, through silence, through fear, through distraction, are not just preserving power, they are interrupting evolution. But the memory persists. In dreams, in myths, in the strange familiarity we feel when we look at ancient ruins under a night sky. Something in us remembers. Something in us calls out, not to gods of thunder and war, but to architects of energy, to caretakers of balance, to the gatekeepers who once taught us how to move between worlds. If we take the implications seriously, if the Stargate is not metaphor but memory, then it is not simply a matter of discovery. It is a matter of return, reclaiming what was lost, repairing what was broken. Not just the gate, but the frequency that once harmonized humanity with something greater, something still waiting, just beyond the veil. What remains is silence, broken only by the wind across ruined ziggurats and the whispers of symbols etched into crumbling stone. The Stargate, if it once stood, is gone to the eye, but it may never have relied on sight. Its legacy is not just physical. It is encoded in vibration, geometry, memory, and myth. And despite the efforts to erase it, the resonance still lingers, in the chant of a forgotten hymn, in the alignment of ancient stones, in the dreams of those who have never heard the story, but somehow know it. We must now ask, did the Sumerians build a gateway to another world, or did they inherit it? Was it the product of divine guidance, extraterrestrial intervention, or something even stranger, a convergence of intention and physics that modern minds have yet to comprehend? The answer may never be found in laboratories or academic journals, because this knowledge was never meant to be dissected. It was meant to be remembered. Every civilization that rose after Sumer echoed the same symbols, the same mechanisms, the same warnings. Whether in the crystal chambers of Mesoamerica, the serpent mounds of North America, the stone rings of the British Isles, or the step pyramids of China, the pattern repeats. A cosmic template, a signal, a question asked across time. Will humanity remember who it once was? And maybe that is the point. The Stargate is not simply a doorway in stone. It is a concept, a process, a test. It is the encoded potential of a species meant for more, a portal not just between worlds but between levels of awareness. The refusal to see it is not a lack of proof, but a lack of readiness. Because to truly see it, to activate it, is to admit that our entire history has been misinterpreted, and that the truth has always been far bigger, far older, and far stranger than we were allowed to believe. Those who fear the Stargate do not fear the stars. They fear what happens when humans realize they were never alone. They fear a population no longer dependent on authority to tell them what is real. Because if the Stargate exists, and if the Ancient Ones once used it to speak with the gods or traverse distant realms, then what else might we be capable of? What else might awaken? So we returned to the ruins. To the carved stone, the missing tablets, the rituals left behind like fragments of a language once spoken across galaxies. Perhaps the gate has already reopened, not in Eridu, but in us. In the moment we begin to remember. In the moment we stop asking for permission to seek the truth. Thanks for listening. This has been Ancient Forbidden Knowledge. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.